I want you to imagine a completely mind-bending scenario. Like, really try to picture this in your head right now.
Oh boy. Okay.
Imagine you sit down and you write a thriller, a really dense geopolitical sci-fi thriller.
Mm-hmm.
You finish it, and you officially deposit this manuscript in the Library of Congress and, various other official international registries. And the year is 2019.
2019, that's the key.
Exactly. And in this novel, you detail a global biological catastrophe. But you don't just, wave your hands in the narrative and say this happens, I don't know, sometime in the foggy future.
You don't keep it vague.
No. You specifically write that this catastrophic event kicks off in mid-November of 2019.
Which is just, it's wild.
It is. You write that this specific biological breach will systematically lead to the world map turning completely red. And that happens in the year 2020.
Yeah.
You explicitly state that Europe is going to face its darkest, most devastating day since the fall of Europe in 1939. You basically map the entire collapse out.
And the real 2020 actually happens.
Exactly.
It's a scenario that genuinely gives you chills when you realize we aren't speaking hypothetically here. Like the hair on the back of your neck stands up because this isn't some thought experiment. It's documented history.
We absolutely are not speaking hypothetically. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Good to be here.
Our source material today is something incredibly obscure, yet just terrifyingly prophetic. We are looking at part 2 of a novel by the author Ghassan Nabhan.
Right.
The novel is called Ghosts of Berlin, and we're focusing specifically on the second part, which is titled Angel in the Dark.
Yeah, and it's a text that, for all intents and purposes, operates almost like a blueprint of a global systemic collapse. But it's hidden entirely under the guise of paperback fiction.
Exactly. So our mission today is to decode this blueprint. We're going to unpack the terrifyingly accurate predictions nestled inside this novel. We really need to analyze the chilling, meticulous logic the author used to effectively map out the 2020 global crisis before it even happened.
Because it wasn't a lucky guess.
No, not at all. We're going to look at how he synthesized real-world data to arrive at a terrifyingly correct answer. And, perhaps just as importantly, we're going to unravel the secondary mystery surrounding all of this.
The real-world mystery.
Right. Why is this book virtually unknown? Why has its author been marginalized, his work suppressed, his visa revoked, and his presence just hidden in the shadows? Especially in an era where everyone on Earth is desperate for answers about what happened to us.
Yeah, it's a multi-layered puzzle. We have the text itself, the real-world science it heavily references, the geopolitical landscape it analyzes, and then, that incredibly strange, almost hostile real-world reaction to its very existence.
It's a lot to cover, but before we jump into the deep end, I do want to offer a quick disclaimer for you listening.
Definitely necessary for this one.
Yeah. This novel contains some very intense geopolitical and historical themes. It delves heavily into extreme nationalism, references to World War II, the legacy of global superpowers, and incredibly dark ideologies.
Very dark.
So we want to make it explicitly clear that our goal today is to impartially analyze the plot, the underlying logic, and the themes of the novel exactly as they were written in the source material.
Right. We are entirely neutral here.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints, left or right, nor are we declaring the author's narrative to be objective historical fact. We are simply reporting on the fascinating ideas contained in the author's work to understand the architecture of this specific prediction.
Precisely. We are examining how a human mind built a predictive model through fiction. We are dissecting the architecture of a prophecy, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the sheer uncanny accuracy of the timeline. The novel kicks off its main catastrophic events with a massive fire and a subsequent biological breach at a facility called Demura.
The Demura facility.
Right, and the spark for all of this. The author points to mid-November 2019. Specifically, the text anchors on November 14th, 2019, as the moment the dominoes start falling.
And that specific date, November 14th, is the structural anchor for everything that follows in the narrative. It's the ignition point that sets the rest of the novel's timeline into motion.
But I have to play devil's advocate here, because my immediate reaction, and probably your reaction to listening to this, is a healthy dose of skepticism.
Sure, of course.
Because plenty of old sci-fi novels have predicted future pandemics. Look at Dean Koontz, look at Stephen King, look at dozens of obscure paperback thrillers from the 80s and 90s.
Oh, absolutely. The genre is full of them.
Right. So Is this just the infinite monkey theorem at play? You know, the idea that if you have a million monkeys typing on a million typewriters for infinity, eventually one of them is going to write the complete works of Shakespeare.
The statistical inevitability argument, yeah.
Yeah. If you have enough authors writing dystopian pandemic thrillers over the last 50 years, eventually one of them is going to guess the right year just by sheer statistical luck, right?
I hear that argument, and I mean, it's the natural first reaction. But the data in the book forces me to firmly push back against it.
Okay, why?
Because what is fascinating here isn't just a generic broad strokes prediction of a pandemic. If he had just written, a terrible virus will one day sweep the globe, we wouldn't be doing this deep dive.
Right, that's too vague.
Exactly. What sets Ghosts of Berlin apart is the extreme, almost mathematical precision of the variables. No other novel in the world specified the exact year 2020 with this level of contextual geopolitical accuracy.
That's true.
Nor did any other novel pinpoint the exact spark occurring in mid-November 2019. I mean, the infinite monkey theorem relies on random, isolated chance. What we see in this text is not random chance. It's calculated, interlocking logic.
I'm still a little skeptical. Let me push back on that, because calculating a global spread from an initial outbreak is just basic epidemiology, isn't it?
Well,
like, anyone with an internet connection and a basic understanding of modern transport could estimate that it takes a couple of months for a virus to circle the globe. That doesn't explain how he knew which year the spark would happen or why he chose November.
You're right that basic epidemiology plays a part, but you have to look at how he layers the logic. He didn't just guess a year. He reverse-engineered the logistics of a modern global crisis based on the exact infrastructure of 2019.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the author looked at the state of the world. The intense globalization, the rapid transit, the hyper-connected international flight routes, the fragile, just-in-time global supply chains.
Right.
He understood that if a highly transmissible pathogen breaches containment, the timeline isn't arbitrary. It follows a mathematical path.
Okay, so walk me through his exact math on that. Why mid-November?
Epidemiologically and logistically speaking, a pathogen released in mid-November would logically take about 1.5 to 2 months to spread silently and then exponentially across the globe.
Because of holiday travel and all that?
Exactly. It incubates, it travels, it seeds itself in major transport hubs, airports in Europe, transit centers in North America, manufacturing hubs in Asia.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that specific timeline, a mid-November breach, perfectly places the absolute peak of the initial global outbreak, the moment of maximum visible crisis, squarely in the first quarter of 2020.
Which is exactly what happened.
That is the exact moment the author describes the red maps appearing. He didn't throw a dart at a calendar. He calculated the transit time of a biological agent moving through modern globalization.
It's the difference between guessing it's going to rain someday and calculating the exact barometric pressure required to cause a storm on a specific Tuesday.
That is exactly it. And the way he presents this red map concept visually in the text is one of the most chilling scenes in the source material.
It really is. It happens when the protagonist, a character named Iris Gauss, makes a horrifying discovery.
Oh, Iris is such a fascinating character.
We'll definitely talk about him more later. But he is this incredibly brilliant, deeply introverted investigator. And he's exploring this dark, hidden, underground cave system.
Right.
And he relies purely on his logic to even find it. Like, he doesn't bust down a door or interrogate a guard. He notices the exact illogical arrangement of book spines on a shelf that acts as a secret code to open a passageway.
Which perfectly establishes how Iris interacts with the world.
Yeah.
He reads patterns that others are blind to.
Exactly. So he descends into this dark, echoing space, and deep inside, he finds a hidden, glass-walled laboratory.
Just a terrifying visual.
Yeah. And inside that glass-walled laboratory, the visual storytelling the author uses is incredibly stark. Iris finds a map of Europe, but it's not a normal map. It is shaded entirely in dark red, and positioned right alongside that red map is a Nazi symbol. But the most jarring, deeply unsettling detail is the text written next to it. It simply says 1939-2020.
1939 to 2020. I mean, the weight of those two dates placed side by side cannot be overstated.
It's heavy.
It is. The author is explicitly equating the biological devastation and the geopolitical collapse of 2020 to the fall of Europe in 1939.
He's making a massive historical parallel. He's arguing that 2020 is not just a health crisis, it's a conquering force. It's Europe facing its darkest, most catastrophic days since the onset of the Second World War. But instead of kinetic warfare, instead of tanks rolling across borders, it's biological warfare.
Yes. And that is a crucial distinction in the author's logic. He recognized that a crisis of this magnitude wouldn't just affect human biology. It would shatter economies, test the limits of authoritarian control, and fundamentally alter the geopolitical map.
Exactly like the March of Armies in 1939.
Right, because a biological event of this scale removes the population without destroying the infrastructure. By putting those 2 years side by side on that red map, he is declaring that the systemic impact of the 2020 event will be on par with a world war.
I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, a question. Think back for a second. Where were you in November of 2019? What were you doing?
Probably living a completely normal life.
Exactly. You were probably planning for the holidays, looking ahead to the new year, complaining about your commute. You were totally unaware of the cliff edge approaching.
Most of us were.
Could you have possibly imagined that at that exact moment, a novel already written, already sitting quietly in official government registries, had perfectly charted the next devastating year of your life?
It's wild to think about.
That a writer had already mapped out the exact timeline, the red maps, and the historical weight of the collapse you're about to live through. It's deeply unsettling.
It's unsettling because it challenges our entire perception of the future. We like to think of the future as an unwritten blank slate.
Yeah.
Completely chaotic and unknowable.
Right.
But the internal logic of this book suggests the opposite.
Yeah.
It suggests that the future, or at least major systemic shifts, are already written in the present data, if you just have the right lens to read it.
Which brings us to the mechanism itself. Because a timeline is just a timeline, you know? Plotting dates on a map is useless if the weapon itself doesn't exist.
Yeah.
How did the author justify the biological capability existing in 2019? How did he know the science was actually ready to produce an event like this?
Well, this is where the novel transitions from a geopolitical thriller into a hard, grounded science critique. The author didn't invent magic science to serve his plot.
No sci-fi mumbo-jumbo.
Exactly. He extrapolated from very real, very public scientific milestones that were occurring right before the book was written.
Wait, let's pause here and establish a baseline. Because the novel takes a massive deep dive into the ethics and reality of gene editing. For someone listening who only vaguely remembers terms like gene editing from sci-fi movies or a brief news segment, what exactly was happening in the real world in 2017 and 2018? What is the practical reality of this tech?
So the primary technology we are talking about here is CRISPR.
CRISPR, right.
Think of CRISPR as a pair of programmable molecular scissors. It allows scientists to go into the DNA of a living organism, find a specific genetic sequence, cut it out, and paste a new one in.
It fundamentally alters the building blocks of life.
Exactly. And in our real world, the years 2017 and 2018 were absolute watershed moments for this technology. The news was saturated with breakthroughs and immense controversies.
What kind of breakthroughs?
We saw the successful modification of animal embryos, and even more alarmingly, the highly controversial, ethically shattering gene editing of human embryos.
Right. The real-world experiments that completely shocked the global scientific community. There is a specific pivotal passage in the text involving a character named Levin.
Yeah, Levin.
Levin is a scientist, a slightly shady figure who brings up these exact real-world scientific events. He explicitly discusses the creation of a pig-human embryo in late January of 2017.
Yeah, the author uses Levin to anchor the fiction firmly in reality. The authors are basically saying, look, I'm not making this up. This is what we were doing in 2017.
And in the real world, the people responsible for those 2018 human gene editing experiments were severely condemned. They faced global backlash, they lost their academic positions, they were punished by their governments.
Publicly, at least.
Right. The public narrative was very comforting. It was basically, okay, the system worked, the rogue scientists were caught and stopped, the ethical boundaries of science are secure.
But that comforting public narrative is exactly where the author's logic sharply diverges.
Yeah.
The author applied a much darker, much more cynical, and arguably much more realistic sociological deduction.
Which was what?
He asked, what actually happens when you punish a scientist who has just proven that a world-changing, incredibly lucrative technology actually works?
I mean, it seems to me that punishing them doesn't uninvent the technology. It just creates a martyr and forces the work into the dark web of science.
Exactly.
I like to think of it like prohibition in the 1920s. Banning alcohol didn't stop people from drinking. It just meant the government was no longer regulating it, and it built the modern mafia. It funded massive underground criminal empires.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Banning rogue gene editing doesn't stop the science. It just builds a biomafia.
And it's exactly the author's thesis. Once the proof of concept exists, Once the knowledge is out there that you can successfully edit embryos, punishing the visible actors simply drives the research underground.
Right.
It pushes it into secret, highly funded laboratories, operating entirely outside the purview of international law, ethical oversight, or public scrutiny.
And that leads us directly to the primary antagonist organization in the novel, the Black Cell Corporation.
Black cell is the logical endpoint of your prohibition analogy. In the text, Black cell is an incredibly powerful, deeply connected American biochemical research institution.
And they operate globally, right?
Yes, with massive shadowy facilities in Berlin, across Africa, and beyond. They are the entity providing the unlimited funding and the total secrecy required to take those proven 2018 gene editing techniques to their horrifying weaponized conclusions.
And the focal point of this dark research is the character Rachel Reinhold.
Rachel.
Rachel is a brilliant American-German scientist working for Black Cell. She's presented as a genius, but one entirely devoid of ethical constraints. She is the biomafia's chief chemist.
Essentially, yes.
She uses the vast resources of Black Cell to create genetically modified horrors. Specifically, the text highlights her creation of something designated Zero, a terrifying, unstable human-animal hybrid. Zero is the walking, breathing proof that the technology has advanced beyond any natural boundary.
But it's crucial to understand that Zero is almost a distraction, or at least it's just one terrifying facet of the true threat.
What do you mean?
The real horror isn't the monster in the cage. The real horror is the underlying capability that created the monster.
What?
If Rachel can create Zero, she can create anything.
Exactly. The text reveals that she is actively developing an advanced virus. Now, on paper, this virus modifies genes for treatment purposes. That's the cover story.
The perfect cover.
But secretly, it serves as a weapon of mass destruction. So let's connect the math here, because this is where the timeline and the science lock together perfectly to explain the author's prediction.
Okay, let's do the math.
The author writes this book in 2019. He looks at the real-world events of 2018, the proven, successful gene editing of embryos. He applies the logic that this tech immediately goes into heavily funded underground proxy labs like Black Cell.
Right. And if the technology is proven in 2018, the author asks a logistical question. How long does it take for a highly motivated, massively funded underground laboratory to refine that technology, weaponize it, and prepare for a global deployment?
And his answer? The author calculates that it takes a maximum of 2 years. 2 years to build the physical infrastructure, scale the pathogen, and launch a global event.
The math is chillingly simple but fundamentally sound based on biological development cycles. 2018, the year of proof, plus a 2-year incubation and scaling period equals the year 2020. That is when the catastrophe hits. According to the novel's internal logic, the author wasn't using a crystal ball. He was using horrifyingly sound geopolitical and scientific arithmetic.
He just carried the one.
Yeah, he saw the starting line in 2018, calculated the speed of the researchers, now unburdened by ethics, and knew exactly when they would cross the finish line in 2020.
It's like he saw the match being struck in a dry forest, calculated the speed of the wind, and simply wrote down the exact time the nearest town would burn.
That's exactly it.
But it's not just about what the science can do. A weapon sitting on a table doesn't fire itself. We have to look at who would pick it up and why. What is the human motivation behind pulling the trigger on a global catastrophe?
And this is where the novel transcends being just a scientific thriller and becomes a profound commentary on human nature and political extremism.
Right.
We have to look closely at Rachel Reinhold's character. She isn't just a mad scientist operating in a vacuum doing evil for evil's sake. She is driven by deeply rooted, highly specific, toxic ideologies.
Yeah, let's unpack Rachel's motivations. She is driven by an extreme, virulent form of nationalism. She is absolutely obsessed with the legacy of Hitler.
Which is horrifying.
There's a pivotal moment in the source material where we get a revelation from her personal driver, a man named Ivan. Ivan is essentially the fly on the wall.
He hears everything.
He does. He tells the investigator about Rachel's private conversations, her unhinged, grandiose fantasies. He reveals that Rachel fantasized about entering Paris victoriously, explicitly mirroring Hitler's conquest of the city in 1939.
It's that date again, 1939.
Yes. She wasn't just working on biology, she was dreaming of empire.
What's fascinating here is the philosophical implication of her work.
Yeah.
We talked about how the bioweapon is the ultimate conqueror. Her goal is to conquer Europe with a biological weapon in 2020.
She wants to replace the Panzer tanks of 1939 with the invisible pathogens of 2020.
Yes.
And if you think about it from a dark, sociopathic perspective, a biological weapon is vastly superior to a kinetic one.
How so?
Well, a bomb destroys the factory, the bridge, the farmland. You conquer a wasteland, a pathogen leaves the factory intact. It leaves the bridge standing. It leaves the farmland fertile.
It just removes the people.
Exactly. It is the perfect, sterile invasion for an extreme nationalist looking to claim territory.
Precisely. And the author's ability to predict this geopolitical alignment isn't magic. It's about reading patterns.
I think of it like reading tectonic plates.
I like that.
Yeah, like if you are a seismologist and you know exactly where the pressure is building scientifically beneath the crust, in this case, the rapid, unregulated advancements in biological sciences, and you know where the fault lines are geopolitically, the rise of extreme nationalism, you don't need psychic powers to predict the earthquake.
No, you don't.
You just need to look at the data.
That is the perfect way to frame it.
Right.
The author read the geopolitical tectonic plates of the late 2010s. He saw the nationalist pressure building. He saw the scientific magma rising. And he also factored in a third element, the massive influence of corporate greed.
Right, Black Cell.
This is represented in the novel by Black Cell operating fake mining companies in Ghana. They use these massive industrial fronts to cover their tracks, launder money, and fund their black ops.
Ah, I see.
He looked at all these massive forces, nationalism, biotech, untethered corporate power, and plotted exactly where and when those fault lines would intersect and rupture.
And when they intersect, the Earth shatters. And what's truly terrifying is how the novel portrays the people who are supposedly in charge during this collapse.
It's not a flattering portrait.
No, not at all. It leans heavily into this sociological theme of the illusion of control. The novel frequently portrays the world as a hospital for the insane, where the lunatics are the ones running the asylum, completely unaware of their own madness.
Yes, the concept that the people holding the levers of immense power are fundamentally disconnected from the reality of the forces they're playing with. We see this perfectly embodied in the character of Thomas Sharman.
Remind me, who is he again?
He's the head of the Black Cell Corporation.
Right. Thomas Sharman is the ultimate portrait of corporate hubris. He thinks he's the master of the universe. He actually fakes disasters at his own facilities.
Which is just crazy.
The text reveals that he is the one who orchestrates the fire at the Demira facility in November 2019. He sets his own building on fire to create a fake victory for his enemies.
A controlled burn, so to speak.
Exactly. He wants the environmentalists, the religious watchdog groups, the oversight committees to think they've struck a blow against him. He wants to distract them, let them celebrate a hollow win, and keep them complacent while his real world-ending plan proceeds entirely in the shadows. He thinks he can control the chaos. He thinks he can ride the tiger.
But the novel clearly shows that once you unleash these biological and ideological forces, control is a complete illusion.
Yeah.
The fire at Demira isn't just a controlled distraction, it becomes the actual breach.
The spark that escapes the containment field.
Exactly. The hubris of these characters, thinking they can manage a biological apocalypse for political or financial gain, is the ultimate madness the author is warning against.
Which brings up a really glaring logical question about the author himself. We've established that, according to the internal logic of this book, the author figured all of this out in 2019.
Right.
He read the data, he calculated the timeline, he knew the biological mechanisms, he understood the geopolitical motivations. If a writer is smart enough to predict all this, why on earth didn't he shout it from the rooftops when 2020 actually happened?
It's a fair question.
When the real world started shutting down, when the maps actually turned red, why didn't Ghassan Nabhan go on every news channel, call every major publication, and say, "I told you so, look at my book, I predicted this perfectly"?
To understand the author's silence, we have to look at the fascinating parallels between the real-life author and his fictional creation, the protagonist Iris Gauss.
Okay, the mirror effect.
There is a profound mirror effect happening here between the creator and his creation.
Let's analyze Iris Gauss deeply for a second, based on how he's presented in the text. Iris is not your typical gun-toting, charismatic action hero investigator.
Not at all.
He is deeply, profoundly introverted. He is a purely analytical investigator who holds the highest possible rank designated as mastermind in this secret organization called Diamond.
But despite his high rank, despite his genius, he is completely isolated from humanity.
Yeah. He lost his family. He is socially awkward to the point of being abrasive and alienating. He physically isolates himself in what he refers to as his space room.
His safe haven.
Right. He spends his free time obsessively playing video games rather than socializing or seeking human connection.
And his primary tool for navigating the world isn't physical force or social manipulation. It's pure, unfiltered, almost cold logic. He notices the minute details that everyone else's brain simply filters out as noise.
Like the book spines.
Exactly. Like we mentioned earlier with the secret cave, he doesn't find it by interrogating someone or kicking down a door. He finds it by noticing an illogical arrangement of book spines on a shelf that his brain instantly decodes as a cipher. He operates entirely in his own head, processing vast amounts of data at a level ordinary people simply can't comprehend.
So what does this tell us about the real-world author? We have to theorize that the author shares this exact psychological profile.
Writers write what they know.
Yeah, and often they pour their own personality, their own neuroses, and their own analytical genius into their protagonists. The author is likely an isolated, brilliant analyst who understands human nature and complex systems perfectly from a distance, but who feels entirely disconnected from the society he is observing.
If we connect this psychological profile to the bigger picture, it explains his silence perfectly. You asked, if you predicted 2020, wouldn't you tell everyone?
Right.
For a normal person seeking validation or fame, yes. But for a mind like Iris Gauss or a mind like this author's, the answer is a definitive, resounding no. Because the author understands exactly how the machinery of society works.
Right. If he came forward in the middle of a global panic, waving his obscure sci-fi book and claiming to be a prophet who predicted the exact dates, the exact methods, and the exact geopolitical fallout, he knows exactly how the media and the authorities would react.
They would absolutely destroy him.
Completely.
The media would paint him as a grifter trying to cash in on a global tragedy. The public, desperate for a scapegoat, would brand him a dangerous conspiracy theorist. Or worse, the authorities, the real-world equivalents of the FBI or the Black Cell Corporation, would investigate him.
Oh, they definitely would.
They wouldn't hail him as a genius. They would ask, how did you know this? Who leaked you this classified information? Are you involved? He would instantly become a target of immense, hostile scrutiny.
His silence when the pandemic hit wasn't due to ignorance. It wasn't a missed opportunity for a book tour. It was a highly calculated survival move by a mind that prefers the safety of the shadows.
Self-preservation.
Yeah. He knew that being undeniably right about a catastrophe is often the most dangerous thing a person can be. Society doesn't reward prophets who bring bad news. It persecutes them.
Exactly. A mastermind doesn't seek the spotlight when the spotlight is a crosshair.
Which is the perfect transition to the final and perhaps most frustrating aspect of this entire deep dive, because it brings us to the real-world mystery of the disappearing book.
This is where it gets really weird.
Why have you, the listener, probably never heard of Ghosts of Berlin until today? If this book is as profound, as mathematically precise, and as terrifyingly accurate as we are outlining, why isn't it a global bestseller studied in universities?
Because of what appears to be active, systematic suppression.
Really?
Yeah. The real-world occurrences surrounding this book post-2020 are incredibly strange, highly irregular, and deeply concerning. Following the events of 2020, physical and digital copies of the book were weirdly and quietly withdrawn from circulation.
Just gone.
Yeah. It became almost impossible to find through standard retail or academic channels.
And it wasn't just the book that vanished. The author himself was deeply marginalized. He essentially vanished from the public eye. And it wasn't just a matter of him, logging off social media. His official visa was suddenly revoked.
Which is a huge escalation.
Massive. His ability to travel internationally, to speak publicly, to distribute his work across borders was systematically dismantled. All of this happened suddenly, quietly, and without any clear public explanation.
The irony here is thick enough to choke on. In the novel, Iris Gauss spends his entire existence investigating massive, complex, systemic cover-ups by incredibly powerful agencies like the FBI and the Black Cell Corporation.
Right.
He risks his life to uncover the truths that vast institutions want buried in concrete. In reality, the author who wrote those very scenes seemed to become the victim of a remarkably similar, very real erasure.
It's a terrifying case of art imitating life, imitating art, but we have to ask the critical question, why? Why go to the immense logistical trouble of suppressing an obscure translated sci-fi novel?
This raises a massive, uncomfortable question about institutional power and narrative control. Let's think about what this book actually represents if it's widely read.
Okay.
The author's underlying argument is that this crisis was entirely predictable. Here is a novel that lays out the exact timeline, the specific scientific methodology regarding gene editing, and the underlying geopolitical motivations for a 2020 biological crisis.
And it was verifiably published, deposited, and registered in 2019.
It's incredibly inconvenient evidence.
It is the most inconvenient truth possible for people in power. Because the existence of this book, according to its own internal logic, proves that